In the beautiful small Spanish village of Alcanfor, the women are cleaning the graves of their deceased family members and adorning them with fresh flowers and candles. The young and gorgeous Raimonda is cleaning the grave of her parents with her sister Sol and teenage daughter Paula. When the eastern wind blows strongly, they struggle to keep the flowers intact. Raimonda says that her mother, Irene, had the most peaceful demise, passing away in the arms of her beloved husband. Sol is shocked and opposes this, because they lost their lives in a fire. Raimonda says they were asleep and would have passed away instantly. As they are finishing up, Augustina comes in. Her friends and neighbors greet her. She gets excited when she sees Raimonda and her family after so long. She marvels at how Paula is all grown up, and lovingly remarks that Paula has Raimonda's father's eyes. Augustina is here to clean her own grave. She talks about how she loves to meditate there. Raimonda and her family leave, as they have to visit their Aunt Paula. Augustina asks them to come to hers afterwards. She casually inquires about Paco, Raimonda's husband, who is back in Madrid, working. Paula, who is new to Raimonda's eccentric village, is surprised that Augustina is cleaning her own grave. Sol mentions that it is a tradition here to buy a plot and look after the grave all their lives. They drive to their Aunt Paula's house. Sol is hesitant to spend time in the house, as it reminds her of her deceased mother, Irene, and stirs grief. The very old Aunt Paula is almost blind, and cannot recognize the others except for Raimonda. Aunt Paula has so lost touch with reality that she asks Raimonda whether she has had the baby yet. Raimonda laughs as she replies that it was 14 years ago, and introduces her daughter Paula, named after this very aunt. The news on TV about the local wildfire upsets Sol, and Raimonda turns it off. Raimonda requests Aunt Paula go with her to Madrid, where she can be properly taken care of. But Aunt Paula refuses, as she has help from Augustina, who visits regularly, as well as Raimonda's mother Irene, whom she claims to have been taking care of the house. Raimonda and Sol are shocked, as their mother passed about 3 years ago. Raimonda tears up when they leave with the boxes of wafers Aunt Paula baked for them. Then they visit Augustina, who resides next door. Augustina tells them that despite being so old, Aunt Paula manages well. Sol mentions that Aunt Paula talks as if their mother is still alive. Augustina reasons that Aunt Paula can never accept that her sister is gone. Raimonda appreciates Augustina for taking care of her aunt. Augustina says that she hopes someone is doing the same for her mother, wherever she is. Augustina's mother was the only hippie in their village, and has been missing for a long time. Raimonda's daughter Paula runs out of internet credits and asks for a recharge. But Raimonda asks her to take a break from the phone instead. Augustina's sister, Brigida, is an up-and-coming TV celebrity. Brigida and Raimonda had auditioned as child singers years ago. Paula gets interested in the conversation, as she never knew of Raimonda's singing side. Brigida has unsuccessfully asked the public on TV to share any information on their missing mother. Raimonda thinks that Augustina should approach the police instead. As they leave, Raimonda comforts Augustina that her mother will be safe, given that she has run away and returned many times previously. Augustina is still worried, as it has been 3 years since they saw her. On the way back to Madrid, Raimonda, Sol, and Paula are munching the wafers given by Aunt Paula. Sol mentions that she saw a new exercise bike at their aunt's house. They cannot figure out why the aunt would want such a bike when she can barely walk, and how she could bake the wafers while being blind as a bat. It is almost night when they get to Raimonda's house. They meet their neighbor Regina, who is vivaciously dressed and leaving for work. She joins Sol, who offers to drop her off at the club. Raimonda and Paula enter their house to find Paco watching TV and drinking too many beers. Paco stares at Paula inappropriately when Raimonda is cleaning up the kitchen. Paco asks for more beer and tells her that he has been fired. Raimonda is dejected and angry. Later at night, when Paula changes clothes, Paco peeps at her secretly. In bed, Paco approaches Raimonda lustfully, but she is worried about her aunt and worn out. When Raimonda shows no interest in making love, Paco pressures her. She asks him not to be a pest, and he gets offended. She apologizes and turns away, but he masturbates on the side. She is disgusted and sad. The next day, Raimonda goes to work. She works hard, doing multiple jobs as a cook, a launderer, and a janitor. When Raimonda gets off the bus at night, after her long, tiresome day, she sees Paula waiting for her, drenched in the rain. Paula looks tense. Soon, Raimonda realizes something is amiss and presses Paula to know what's wrong. Raimonda asks her where Paco is. Paula slowly reveals the truth. Paco is there, lying lifeless in the kitchen. Raimonda screams at this sight. Paula tells her the horrifying story of how Paco came at her in the kitchen and jumped on her. He was drunk and told her he wasn't her real father when questioned. When she tried to evade him, he unzipped his pants and repeated that it was all right, as he was not her father. She took the kitchen knife to scare him, but he thought she was bluffing and jumped at her again. Raimonda, shocked to her core, cries and hugs her daughter. Although flustered, Raimonda is sure of one thing. She tells Paula that whatever happens, Raimonda is the one who stabbed Paco, and Paula was nowhere near. Raimonda then rolls her sleeves up and cleans up the blood and the knife. As she is about to move the body to the refrigerator, someone rings the bell. Raimonda and Paula get tense, but it turns out to be the nearby restaurant owner, Emilio, where she previously worked. He requests Raimonda to keep the keys to the restaurant, as he is going to Barcelona, but wants potential buyers to see it, At first she refuses, but on second thought, she takes the keys. Emilio asks her why there's blood on her neck, but Raymonda cleverly dismisses it as a woman's trouble. She asks about his journey and the restaurant's price. Emilio remarks that it is sad that she is interested in the restaurant but not the owner. Once Emilio leaves, Sol calls Raymonda. Raymonda attempts to avoid the call, but Sol insists. Sol informs them that Augustina called her to let them know that Aunt Paula has passed. Raymonda is shocked. Sol adds that Augustina will do the needful for the funeral, and that Aunt Paula has already prepared and paid for everything. Raymonda tells her that she cannot attend the funeral. Sol is appalled, as Raymonda and the aunt had a special bond. Raymonda says that she is too preoccupied, and just to make the excuse that she had gallbladder surgery or something, she convinces Augustina to attend the funeral alone. Late in the night, Raymonda and Paula drag Paco's body into the freezer at Emilio's restaurant. The next day, she checks the body inside the freezer, but is startled by an unexpected visitor. A young man asks whether the restaurant is open to cater to a film crew for a few days. Raymonda sees a business opportunity and takes it up. She has to prepare lunch for 30 people by 4 p.m. She does grocery shopping. On her way back, she meets her neighbors Regina and Anise, whom she convinces to sell her their pork, blood sausages, and cookies. The lunch goes well. Sol goes to their native village to attend the funeral of Aunt Paula. Being scared of ghosts, she walks fearfully into her aunt's deserted house. She calls out for Augustina as she sees a creepy shadow. She screams and tries to flee when she sees someone resembling her mother coming down the stairs. As dreaded, it turns out to be her mother, with unkempt hair and a pale body, requesting to talk to her. She runs away in fear to Augustina's, where the wake is happening. She is relieved once Augustina hugs her. Augustina shares the story of how she found out Aunt Paula had passed. A mysterious knock on her door awakened her and led to the body. The mourning neighbors wonder whose spirit this was, Paula's, or the other one. Later, Sol asks Augustina whether the mourners mean that her mother Irene's spirit was helping Aunt Paula. Augustina confirms that many villagers have seen Irene's spirit. She adds that spirits return when they have unfinished business. She asks whether Sol had such encounters with Irene, but Sol denies it. When Sol leaves after the funeral, Augustina asks her to take Aunt Paula's valuables, but Sol refuses, as Raymonda will come by later to pick them up. When Sol gets back and leaves after parking her car, she hears a terrifying knock from its boot. Her mother calls out from the boot, asking her to let her out. Sol states that her mother is deceased. Her mother asks her to let her out anyway, and Sol opens it, scared. Inside the boot is Sol's mother, with a bunch of luggage. She heartily apologizes and asks her not to be afraid. She asks for a hug, and they do it tearfully. Irene has packed all of Aunt Paula's valuables, which the neighbors tried to snipe away, except for the righteous Augustina. Sol hesitantly accommodates her mother, or the mother's spirit. Her mother is all set to start afresh with Sol, who runs an illegal home salon. She asks for a haircut and dye. She is excited to live in a new place with new people, and add company to Sol's lonely house. Then, Raymonda calls up Sol and is sad to have missed the funeral. She adds that she has taken over Emilio's restaurant for now. She mentions that Paco has left them, and she thinks he won't return to her at all. Sol tries to comfort her in vain. Once they hang up, Irene tells Sol that none of the three of them have had any luck with men. Sol counters her mother, saying that is not true, as her father loved her mother so dearly. Her mother reveals the shocking truth, that their father cheated on her repeatedly. She kept it from her children. Sol is worried about whether her father's spirit will also appear, but her mother evades that. Irene is just happy to live with her daughter, whose husband abandoned her 2 years ago. At night, Sol wakes up with a shudder, unable to accept that her mother's spirit is sleeping in the next room. She goes to Irene's room and sleeps next to her. The next morning, Raymonda pays her neighbors generously for their help with the catering. With their assistance, she moves her own refrigerator to the restaurant and lies that the restaurant's freezer is not working. She accepts when they offer to work with her for the catering. Sol cuts and dyes Irene's hair. Sol also tries to know if her mother has any unfinished business. Irene just hints that she has something to fix. They decide that her mother will pretend to be an illegal immigrant from Russia, working as an apprentice when Sol's salon clients come over. Sol teaches her mother her routine of hairdressing. When her usual clients come over, they are astonished that Sol has let in a stranger, and warn her to be careful. Irene wonderfully acts out as a Russian who knows no Spanish, and helps Sol's clients. At the restaurant, Raymonda happily takes up an offer to host a wrap-up party for the film crew. When the film crew member tries to flirt with her, she evades it. Raymonda makes a surprise visit to Sol's with Paula. She prepares Paula to say nothing about Paco, and states that her sister Sol has been acting weird ever since she returned after the funeral. Sol is surprised to see Raymonda without notice, and tries to stop her from entering the house and then the washroom. Raymonda persists and goes into the washroom. Sitting on the toilet, she smells farts, and follows the trail of the smell. She finds her mother's gown, and tells Sol that it smells like when their mother used to fart her ass off. They share a hysterical laugh, reminiscing about how their mother could never hide her farts, and used to be the first one to laugh. Irene, who is hiding under the bed, listens and joins in the laughter. Raymonda mentions that she can still hear her mother laughing in her memories. Irene zips her mouth alertly, and Sol now laughs too much to cover her panic. Raymonda sees the rest of Irene's clothes in the wardrobe and scolds Sol for keeping deceased people's clothes. She then spots Aunt Paula's valuables in the suitcase and questions Sol why she took them. Sol is caught off guard and doesn't reply appropriately. Raymonda assumes that Sol wanted to steal all of Aunt Paula's things and gets enraged despite Sol's vain protests. Raymonda leaves angrily, accusing Sol of being a thief. Back in the restaurant, Paula realizes that her mother has kept Paco's body in the freezer. Raymonda explains that she was not able to get rid of it yet. Paula is distressed about working in the restaurant where Paco, her own father, lies cold. Raymonda finally tells her that Paco was not her father. Paula thinks that her mom is lying to make her move on. Raymonda explains that Paco knew Paula was not his daughter, but accepted her as such. Paula is shocked and wants to know who her father is. Raymonda tells her it is a guy from the village who is no more. She convinces Paula that she will tell her more when the time is right, and they get ready for the film crew's party. Regina tends the bar, while Raymonda and Paula serve. Meanwhile, Sol and Irene drive by the restaurant. Irene cannot wait to get a better sneak peek at her daughter Raymonda and granddaughter Paula. Sol warns her to be careful. They exclaim at how the restaurant is thriving. Irene is glad that Raymonda is getting better at business after having a hard life. Sol asks Irene to stay hidden in the car and gets into the restaurant with Aunt Paula's suitcase. Raymonda is excited to see her sister Sol and has already forgotten the fuss about Aunt Paula's inheritance, and they reconcile lovingly. The musicians of the film crew are jamming tunes, and Raymonda hums the lyrics. Sol is delighted to see her sister sing after so long. When Paula tells her that she has never heard her sing, Raymonda is taken aback, realizing how drastically different her life has become. She talks to the musicians and sets the scene. She beautifully sings the song that her mother Irene taught her as a child, with tears trickling down her cheeks. The song talks about being scared of the painful past returning to encounter her. As Irene listens to Raymonda singing the same song after so long, she also tears up. For a split second, Raymonda sees her mother far away in the car, but dismisses it as her imagination. As she finishes the song, Irene cries her heart out inside the car. Everyone applauds Raymonda's singing. The next day, Raymonda gets a call from a potential buyer who wants to see the restaurant. She evades showing the restaurant by lying that it is already taken. She immediately contacts Emilio, explaining that she refused to show the restaurant to the buyer because he seemed fishy. She concocts that the buyer was happy to know that the restaurant is not doing well, and might be planning to use it as a front for shady businesses. Emilio is infuriated that Raymonda said the restaurant was unsuccessful. Raymonda apologizes and states that she has taken it over. Emilio is mad at her until he learns Paco has left her. As Emilio has already had feelings for her, this news cools him down. He agrees to Raymonda's plans and offers to pay in installments. Augustina calls Raymonda, informing her that she is in Madrid and requesting that she visit her. Raymonda tries to elude, but Augustina discloses that she has been diagnosed with cancer and admitted to the hospital. Aghast about this, Raymonda leaves Paula at her sister's, along with Aunt Paula's suitcase. At the hospital, Augustina is happy to see Raymonda, but asks for a favor. She asks Raymonda to talk to her mother about whether Augustina's mother is alive. Raymonda is shocked, and she lets her know that it is crazy to assume she can talk to spirits. Augustina strongly believes that Irene is appearing to her, as she did for Aunt Paula and other villagers. Unable to fathom this, Raymonda counters asking why she can't see her herself. Augustina answers that Irene always hid from her. Back at Sol's, Paula and Irene bond for the first time as granddaughter and grandma. Paula believes that this is the spirit of her grandma. Irene asks her about Raymonda. Paula shares that Raymonda never mentions her childhood or mother. Irene sadly recalls how Raymonda was the apple of her eye as a baby, but when they became short of money, Sol was made to stay with her, but Raymonda was sent to Aunt Paula's. Later they reunited, but as a teenager, Raymonda grew distant for some unknown reason. She expresses how painful it is when a daughter stops loving their mother, and asks Paula to show her love immensely to her mom. Meanwhile, Raymonda shops for rope, tape, and shovels and gets a rental van. She lies to Sol that Paco has returned, and she needs to be alone with him to reconcile. So Paula stays at Sol's, and Raymonda goes to Regina's. When Raymonda tells Regina she will pay for her night's work, Regina wonders whether Raymonda has intimate interests in her. Raymonda clarifies that they have to move a freezer into a dung heap with the help of the neighbors. With Regina on board, they move the freezer into the van. Raymonda and Regina drive to the Jukar River, which is more than 100 miles away. Raymonda offers to pay Regina by the hour to help her go to the riverside, dig a hole, and bury the freezer without any questions. Regina is irritated that Raymonda didn't reveal the gravity of the work earlier in the day, and that her life is already complicated as a penniless illegal migrant. Raymonda agrees to let her take over the bar at the restaurant for a month. They dig the hole, painstakingly dump the freezer, and cover it up. Raymonda carves the nearby tree to leave a trace. Soon she is back to her life, running the restaurant. One night, Augustina surprises her and asks whether Raymonda has found out anything about her mother. She is dejected, as Raymonda is not taking this seriously. Raymonda tries to explain that it is unfair to make such crazy demands, even if she is suffering from cancer. Augustina states that her mother disappeared the very day Raymonda's parents passed away in the fire in a hut. Raymonda dismisses this as just a coincidence. Augustina retorts that her mother left in the morning to join Raymonda's father in the hut. Raymonda is shocked and refutes this. Augustina insists that they were both having an affair, but Raymonda shouts that her mom would never have allowed that. Augustina counters that Irene knew and moved to Aunt Paula's because of this. Augustina explains that Raymonda doesn't know anything, because she had no contact with her own mother. She adds that Irene always complained about how her own daughter, Raymonda, was treating her like shit. Raymonda is hurt and silent. Augustina states that her mother's disappearance and Raymonda's parents' demise are connected. She will not go to the police, but prefers to solve it by themselves. Neither does she want to go on TV to talk about this, even if her sister insists. Raymonda refuses when she asks to solve this. The next day, Raymonda and Paula are going to Sol's. Paula insists that they let Sol know about this visit, but Raymonda dismisses it. When she opens the door, Sol has to shout and greet Raymonda to let Irene know about the visit. Irene, who was washing a client's hair, hides in the bedroom. Raymonda finds the commotion weird, but asks for a haircut and talks about selling Aunt Paula's house. Paula goes into the bedroom to join her grandma and they watch TV together. The client asks for the Russian helper, who is actually Irene. Raymonda is surprised that her sister never told her about this new helper. Meanwhile, on the TV show, Augustina walks in. The anchor asks her about her hippie mother, who disappeared on the same day as a couple in the neighborhood, also passed. Shocked to hear this, Raymonda and Sol turn to watch the show. Augustina explains how their village has frequent fires. The anchor adds that the village also has the highest rate of insanity. Augustina explains that her mother was mentally well, but a hippie. The anchor asks about the rumors about the woman and her husband, who lost their lives in the fire. Augustina changes her mind and refuses to talk about it. Raymonda tells Sol that Augustina thinks their mother's spirit appears to them, and wants to ask about Augustina's mother. She adds how Augustina said her mother had an affair with Raymonda and Sol's father. Sol discloses that she learned about the affair from her mother. Raymonda asks Sol what else she knows. Raymonda swears to believe, and Sol reveals that their mother, Irene, has been appearing all the time. She tells the whole story of how Irene took care of Aunt Paula, arranged her funeral, everything. Raymonda asks her if this story is coming from Augustina, who is not in her right mind. Sol asks back about how Raymonda herself wondered about Aunt Paula baking the wafers and arranging the funeral. Raymonda slowly begins to believe, and asks whether Sol has seen their mother's spirit. Sol confirms it, and finally, Raymonda cracks the mystery that the said Russian is actually her mother. Tearfully, Raymonda finds her mother hiding under the bed. Irene says that she has returned to ask Raymonda's forgiveness for something. Raymonda breaks into a sob, and immediately leaves with Paula. Irene cries, but is relieved that the worst is over, and that she hopes Raymonda has not rejected her. Sol asks Irene whether she came back only to apologize to Raymonda. Irene replies that she returned to live with Sol too. Sol never presses her to know more, but asks to tell her everything later. Raymonda cries her heart out while walking down the street. Paula comforts her. Raymonda tells Paula that she has to speak to her mother, and Paula suggests going back instantly. Raymonda is hesitant, but follows. Raymonda and Irene hug and take a walk. Irene doesn't know how to begin. Raymonda clarifies whether Irene is a ghost, or her real mother. Irene confirms she is alive, but adds that she would have returned either way to apologize for not realizing what was happening to Raymonda. She says that after finding out that her husband was cheating with Augustina's mom, she moved to Aunt Paula's. On the afternoon of the fire, she was angry when Raymonda called Aunt Paula but never asked for her. She badmouthed Raymonda to Aunt Paula. Aunt Paula defended Raymonda and explained how her abused Raymonda and gotten her pregnant, as well as how Paula is Raymonda's daughter and sister. Irene could not forgive herself for letting such a monstrous thing happen to Raymonda. She realized this is why Raymonda grew distant, left for Madrid with Paco, and kept no contact. Raymonda tells Irene that she hated her back then, for being a mother who never noticed anything, which Irene understands. Back then, wild with revenge, Irene wanted to harm her husband, but found him sleeping with Augustina's mom inside the hut. She immediately set fire to the hut, and they were gone in no time. She wanted to surrender to the police, but went to see Aunt Paula first. She found Aunt Paula completely delusional and unhinged. So Irene couldn't leave Aunt Paula, and instead stayed to take care of her. To her luck, police dismissed the fire as a natural disaster. Raymonda comforts her and shares how everyone thinks she is a ghost. Irene replies that such superstitions are bliss. Sitting on the beautifully lit street bench, they reconcile. The next morning, they all return to Aunt Paula's. Irene asks Raymonda to stop at the river Jukar to reminisce about their old picnics there. Raymonda and Paula walk onto the riverbank. Raymonda tells her that this spot was Paco's favorite. Paula reads the carving on the tree and says that she is glad that Paco rests there. Once at Aunt Paula's house, they wish the aunt was alive to see all of them. As they make dinner, Paula wonders whether the exercise bike was Irene's, and Irene confirms. Aunt Paula used to roar with laughter while watching Irene exercise. Augustina visits them, and Raymunda invites her to dinner as Irene hides upstairs. Augustina apologizes for the TV show incident, and shares how she was tempted by the offer for treatment in Houston. She has now decided it is better to pass peacefully at her own home. She has to leave to get an injection from a nurse. Raymunda shares her anger about Augustina's sister, who is not helping Augustina at all. Augustina reveals that her sister is giving her silent treatment for walking out of the TV show. She lovingly says how she envies the sisterhood between Raymunda and Sol. At night, the eastern wind blows heavily. Irene sneaks into Augustina's. Augustina is happy to see Irene, whom she thinks is a spirit. Irene tells Augustina that she is here to take care of her, as she understands her loneliness. Augustina could not go to the nurse and get the injection because of fatigue. Irene gives her the injection and helps her sleep. Raymunda comes in at night and tells her how she has a lot to share, including about Paco. Irene reassures her that they can meet every day, but she will stay with Augustina and take care of her, to make up for the absence of Augustina's mother.